Now, over in the Big Ten, this is a really fun conference right now. A lot of fun sleepers. Well, maybe Indiana isn't a sleeper anymore now that they're ranked number 13, but Illinois is still right up there. Wisconsin, 3-1 in the conference. They've been playing solid football as of late, but it's still Oregon and Penn State at the top here, right with Indiana, 4-0, 4-0, 3-0, respectively for Indiana, Oregon, and Penn State. And those three teams, I think, have all been playing solid football. I'm the most nervous about Penn State just because of how they've struggled with teams like Southern Cal, and they go on the road to Wisconsin this week. I think that's going to be a very difficult game for sure. Illinois is a weird team. They've played solid football, but they don't seem to be able to beat those upper tier opponents right now, which is fine. I think you're not necessarily expecting that as an Illinois fan right now, even though this team is good. So maybe wait a couple years, maybe you'll be built up to that level. Obviously, Ohio State is still in the mix here, even though they're only 2-1 in the conference. They're still a very, very, very good football team. So definitely not writing off the Buckeyes by any stretch of the imagination. Then in the basement down there, it is still Rutgers, Southern Cal, UCLA, and Purdue. So a little bit funny to me that two of the teams that essentially nuked the Pac-12 are second and third to last in this conference above only Purdue, and Purdue is horrific. I don't know how much you've watched Purdue, but don't. It's not worth your time. Unless it's the Illinois game, which Illinois almost lost. But anyway, this very competitive conference this year. I still expect Oregon to be able to make the Big Ten Conference title game and win it at this point. I like what I've seen from this Oregon team. Really capitalized on the opportunity versus Ohio State, and Dan Lanning is an excellent coach for sure. But this past weekend in the Big Ten, a lot of good games. Oregon took on Purdue, 35-0. Purdue's terrible. Next, Indiana took on Nebraska. This was a game that a lot of people had marked as maybe a potential upset spot for Indiana, and Indiana beat the brains out of Nebraska, 56-7. Curtis Rourke continues his, I don't want to say Heisman campaign, but sleeper Heisman campaign. He's kind of right in the bottom area of that mix, and fourth guys down there, but I really like what I've seen from Indiana this year. Kurt Signetti has that program really turned in the right direction. They are 7-0 right now, almost a top 10. Top 10 Indiana, maybe, over the next couple weeks? You never know. Then Michigan and Illinois, this was classic Big Ten West football, even though the divisions don't exist anymore and these teams are in the East. Don't worry about it. But Michigan turned the ball over 3 times despite outgaining Illinois and lost as a result. Michigan, this is just not the same Michigan team. They lost so much of the talent. It's very visible, and they're really struggling to beat teams this year. Illinois played solid in this one, enough to get it done. They move up to number 20 in the rankings as a result. Wisconsin beat Northwestern 23 to 3. 20 tweet. I can't speak. Wisconsin beat Northwestern 23-3 in that game. Solid game from the Badgers. They just keep knocking off wins at this point, and obviously a good opportunity versus Penn State this weekend to notch up a really big one for that program. UCLA finally won a game. They beat Rutgers 35-32, and after a 4-0 start, Rutgers has now dropped 3 in a row to Nebraska, Wisconsin, and UCLA, so the Scarlet Knights kind of fallen back to earth down there at the bottom of the Big Ten. Southern Cal lost to Maryland. Jeez. Billy Edwards and Caden Prather had an excellent connection going in this one. Prather going for 9 receptions for 111 yards. Solid game. The USC Classic defense looks to be back. They're really struggling to stop anything right now. And then, how about Michigan State moving to 4-3, 2-2 in the Big Ten? Aiden Childs is really developing as the year goes on. Threw for 256 and a touchdown in this game. He's really improved. Caleb Johnson just cannot do enough to get Iowa to win these games on his own. They're going to need a passing game, and I don't think you get one of those until you find a new offensive coordinator. Looking ahead to next week in the Big Ten, there are a lot of good matchups, and namely one we've already mentioned a couple times, this Penn State at Wisconsin game I think is going to be a very close game, very entertaining game. Rutgers travels to Southern Cal, and that's going to be a weird game. Both of those teams are kind of in free fall right now. We'll see who can rebound. Nebraska travels to Ohio State. Rough 2-game stretch from Nebraska, the Indiana game, and now this. I would expect this to go pretty similarly, if I'm being honest. Washington travels to Indiana this weekend. College game day will be there. First time ever. They will be going up to Bloomington for an Indiana game, so always cool as a fan base to get to experience that for the first time. Number 20, Illinois is on the road at Oregon. That'll be in the picks segment later, but I think this will be at least an intriguing game. Northwestern is at Iowa. I would expect to win this. Northwestern does not have a good run defense, and Iowa has Caleb Johnson. Maryland plays at Minnesota in the battle of teams that have collectively ruined Southern Cal's season, and I think Maryland wins that game, honestly. I like what I've seen from Billy Edwards this season. 13 touchdowns, only 4 picks, been playing solid football. Then the rivalry game, Michigan State at Michigan, and Michigan might be on upset alert again. This is not a good Michigan team, and Aiden Childs, like I said earlier, is improving week by week. I really think he and the Spartans could stun the Wolverines this weekend for the first time in a while. But as far as the Big Ten's playoff hopes, I think Oregon and Ohio State are pretty much marked in at this point. Penn State, I think, is in a weird spot where they need to win out in the conference to make the conference title game, in my opinion, and I'm just not sure that they're going to be able to do that when you look at their schedule. They have obviously at Wisconsin, then they get Ohio State. The rest of the schedule is not too bad, but I don't think they're able to beat Ohio State. And then you look at a team like Indiana, who also is in this conference, who's playing incredible football. I think it starts to get really crowded at the top really quickly. I think Indiana has a playoff chance as well, but those four teams, I think if the Big Ten is going to get a max in, it would be all of those four, and it would take a very specific scenario to happen, but that's kind of your playoff outlook for the Big Ten this week, and that is it for the conference overall.